Last season may have been a little weak when it came to the quality of isekai, but I think with this upcoming one we'll have a bit more to look forward to. Not only do we have the return of a couple popular series, but there's also quite a bit of potential with some of the new ones. We have the next best skeleton after Ainz, a hero who decides to join the Demon Lord, and even an isekai that involves the hunting of your standard OP isekai protagonist. So let's do as we usually do and take a look at every fantasy and isekai the spring season has to offer. But first, today's video is sponsored by NordVPN, one of the most reliable ways to secure your data, as well as my new go-to method for streaming anime that otherwise wouldn't be available to me. You know that new Mushoku Tensei OVA that only came out a couple days ago? You can actually watch it for free right here on YouTube. All you need to do is change your location to one that supports the MobuSeka YouTube channel, then just like that you have access to a whole selection of seasonal anime, some of which aren't even available on Crunchyroll. As for why I recently made the switch, well, aside from the numerous security features that protect my data, Nord also provides the fastest network speeds currently available. I'm a big fan of how they don't force you to sacrifice speed in exchange for better security. So not only is that good for streaming anime and movies, but it's also very ideal for gaming. There's no downsides to switching to a region-locked server, and you can even protect yourself from any potential DDoS attacks. So if any of that sounds useful to you, then be sure to use nordvpn.com/AniNews, or even just code AniNews at checkout for an exclusive deal of 72% off a 2-year plan. It's completely risk-free with its 30-day money-back guarantee, and even comes with an additional month on top of that. But now, let's talk about some anime. Starting with the sequels, first we have the highly anticipated return of Shield Hero. After numerous delays constantly pushing the new season back, we can finally expect Naofumi's return on April 6th. Now, if you've watched any of my other news videos before, then you'd probably already know that what we can expect is the Spirit Tortoise arc from Volume 6. But what you may not know is the recent confirmation of how many episodes it'll be. Unlike the first season back in 2019, Season 2 will only consist of 13 episodes. It's a full 12 less than what we're used to, but will likely be made up for in the expected release of Season 3 right after. Now, I haven't found any official sources confirming this myself, but supposedly Season 3 will air back-to-back with Season 2. So if that is in fact proven to be true, then there won't be much of a wait between the end of this arc and the New World one to come after. Considering the lack of any solid information though, my personal guess would be that it's going to be more of a split core thing. As soon as Season 2 finishes its run at the end of June, I find it more reasonable to think the studio will use the summer months to finish up Season 3. You know, something more along the lines of what Mushoku Tensei did. Moving on, next we have Season 3 for Ascendance of a Bookworm, one of the more realistic isekai when it comes to the portrayal of everyday life in a medieval society. If you've already watched the first 2 seasons, then I'm sure you're already well aware of what to expect in this new one. There's no OP protagonist or war against demons, but instead simply well-written characters and more grounded conflicts. It's a true-to-form slice of life that does really well to depict exactly that. So, if you're looking for something a bit more lighthearted but with quite a bit of depth, then I highly recommend keeping up with this one. Now, as for the new anime, the first on our list is Studio Kai's adaptation of the Skeleton Knight Isekai, a series that isn't particularly good or bad, but more so just checks the boxes for what you'd expect from a standard isekai. There's the otaku who gets transported to a fantasy world, the video game-like setting that seems so very familiar, then his new body which possesses the same appearance and power level as his in-game avatar. So I guess in that sense it is kind of similar to Overlord, but it's nowhere near as good when it comes to the overall story and narrative. The plot does focus around this skeleton knight who hides behind a face-covering holy armor set, but there isn't nearly that same level of depth and world building. What we get instead is this OP character that no one knows is a skeleton, traveling around and doing your standard adventurer type stuff. It's a more lackadaisical approach to storytelling, one that doesn't do anything entirely innovative, but can still be entertaining with the way the OP protagonist is showcased. If I had to compare it to anything, it sounds like it'd be similar to the episodes when Ainz is cosplaying as an adventurer. No one knows he's this overpowered skeleton, but he still goes around trying to help out people anyway. Help that usually just ends up in him brute forcing a solution with sheer strength. Moving on, the next isekai on our list is called MobuSeka. Otherwise known as Trapped in a Dating Sim, the world of otome games is tough for mobs. Now, with otome game being in the title, you'd be correct to assume that the premise is similar to the villainous one. The key difference here though is that instead of the protagonist using their in-game knowledge to cleverly avoid certain death, this one is instead using it to manipulate the world to the way that he wants it to be. That said, this world in particular is a rather punishing one. You see, because society is tailored to always benefit women, it's difficult for an average guy like him to do pretty much anything. Luckily for him, his pre-existing knowledge of the game itself not only allows him to take advantage of certain plot points, but also of some pretty useful pay-to-win items. Stuff that makes him become OP in ways that you wouldn't typically expect, especially in an otome game like this one. So, even if you weren't a fan of the villainous anime, I do believe you can find a lot more entertainment from this one. Yes, there is a little bit of romance, but there's also quite a bit of action as well. Like these intense-looking mech battles that I'm sure have a perfectly good reason for being in an otome game. What we have next is a rather interesting isekai called The Executioner and Her Way of Life, a JC staff adaptation of the 2019 light novel, which was the first series since Danmachi to win the grand prize at the GA Bunko Awards. If you're wondering what that means, well, that just meant this novel was good enough to get published. It's a yearly contest in which unpublished writers submit their works and can then receive rewards dependent on how good they are. There are writers who have received lower tier prizes in the past, but ever since Danmachi was submitted back in 2013, no series has been able to win the grand prize until this one. So that alone makes this particular anime significantly more interesting. The part that sold me the most though was the unique premise that approaches the isekai genre differently. You see, the protagonist of this isekai isn't the person who got transported. No, instead it's the person whose job it is to assassinate the people who've been isekai'd. In this world where summons from Japan are known to bring disaster and calamity, we follow this executioner whose job it is to kill them. Normally she's able to do it without very much trouble, but this time she comes across a target who happens to be immortal. So what we end up getting is a story that pretty much revolves around this interesting dynamic between Stray and Executioner. The Executioner is trying to find a way to kill this Stray from Japan, and the Stray is more than happy to tag along while she does it. It's definitely a type of isekai that I've never seen before, so I do think that this is one that's worth checking out. Now, something a bit more basic is the new action fantasy coming from Studio Silverlink. The classic OP protagonist reincarnation trope, this time in the form of the greatest demon lord is reborn as a typical nobody. And just like all the similar shows that came before it, it doesn't seem like this one does very much to change the formula. There's the reincarnated demon lord whose ancient magic is significantly stronger than whatever's available now, then the whole Magic Academy arc where he shows how much more powerful he is than everyone. It's really just all stuff that we've seen before in shows like Misfit or the Sage one from last season. Another standard fantasy with a basic OP protagonist is the upcoming adaptation of I'm Quitting Heroing. It's a 2017 light novel that tries to be different with the way it portrays the hero-demon lord dynamic. You see, after the hero had already defeated the demon lord and its massive army, he was then exiled from the human kingdoms for being way too strong. But rather than turn against them and wipe them out, which he's 100% fully capable of, he instead goes to the demon lord and tries to join them. Not to get revenge or do anything like that, but just to help out in rebuilding the army he previously decimated. So it's more of a comedy that tries to show what would happen if the hero ended up joining the demon lord. The next anime on our list is a more adventure-based fantasy called The Dawn of the Witch, this one being more focused on a single overall narrative instead of the protagonist-centric stories of the previous two. It's not really something I've heard very much about, but from what I've read it's really just more of your vanilla type adventure fantasy. There's your group of magically gifted students who are sent on a journey, and it's that journey that eventually intertwines with the world's past war between the church and witches. So if that type of party-based adventuring is what you're into, then perhaps this show may be of a little bit of interest to you. Now, the last two anime that I have are more just comedic fantasies than they are anything else. The first is the adaptation of This Healer's a Handful, a very simple story that puts a weeknight together with a witty healer. Then what we get in return is this entertaining back and forth dynamic between very eccentric characters. It's not a show that's meant to be taken very seriously, but instead intended to be enjoyed through the many bizarre encounters of this quirky duo. As for the other, this one is called RPG Real Estate, a lighthearted slice of life that basically involves cute girls selling properties to all sorts of different fantastical creatures. I can't say it's something I plan on watching myself, but if you're a fan of episodic fantasies like Restaurant to Another World, then I do believe that this could be a decent iteration to that. In any case, that's all the isekai and fantasy anime that's coming out next season. In terms of shows I plan on watching that don't fall into that category though, there's Studio Wit's comedic drama Spy X Family, the supernatural mystery series Summertime Rendering, then my personal choice for wildcard of the season called Friends Game. The other two I'm sure you've heard at least a little bit about, but it's Friends Game that I haven't really heard anything. The fact its source material is rated fairly highly though, along with a premise that's very reminiscent of Squid Game, does lead me to believe that this could very well be the dark horse this season. So if you're a fan of series that force people to play games against their will, then I definitely recommend checking out this one. But yeah, that's pretty much everything that I got for you today. If any of these caught your eye, then be sure to let me know which ones you're most looking forward to in the comments. Now, before I go, I'd like to thank NordVPN once again for sponsoring this video. It's sponsors like them that allow me to keep making videos the way I do, so if you want to show them some love, then head over to nordvpn.com/AniNews. Not only is it a deal worth investing into, but it actually goes a long way to help support the channel. But anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So, until next time, ciao!